Hey everybody, I'm going to read a couple chapters. These chapters are going to be called Arguments Against the Early Origin of the Gospels, and the next chapter will be the Message of the New Testament. And these are written by Pastor Richard Wurmbrand, and this is his book, The Answer to the Atheistic Handbook, which was a handbook that was taught in the education system of the Communist Party in the Soviet Union in the 60s. And this book actually came out in 61 by Moscow's Academy of Science. And Wurmbrand was from Romania, and when the Communist Party went into Romania, they took over the churches, and Reverend Wurmbrand started a underground ministry, which he was arrested and basically in confinement and tortured for 14 years until international pressure got him out of there. But wow, what a story, especially in light of our world, and sometimes, especially for those that have gone to college. I always kind of harp on this, but when you go to college like I did at Cal State University Northridge, you kind of find out really quick that college is nothing but a giant church. and for a guy who never was raised in the church, man, it was like super easy to spot. I think for a lot of people, a lot of young people that go to church or go to college, they're kind of not, they don't know what kind of hit them when they go in there, and they get kind of a little indoctrinated. And I was one who, man, saw it right off the bat. But I was raised in a socialistic home with my father, so I was kind of really cued into a lot of things already, and thoughts of socialism or Marxism. So when I heard that kind of language being spilled out into the classrooms in college in a more romantic way, I kind of already knew the drill, and it didn't really capture me much, and instead it made me think even more of why do they do this, and why are they so bent on it, especially when materialism is taught in colleges like it is, kind of a secular humanist materialistic worldview. Which, if that's the case, then really there's no point to even sharing your thoughts on philosophy much at that point, because, I mean, let's face it, if everything's just material, and then love is material, and compassion is material, and right and wrong is just a social substrate anyway, so it's just going to change over time. So who's to say when it should be changed, or things of that nature. So there's really no point to it all. But anyway, that's why I love reading these books, because a lot of people don't know what life was maybe like in the Soviet Union and during socialism and Marxism or communism, and so it's neat to read about it. Sometimes it's not so much the ism that's the problem, right? It's just the human hearts behind the isms, but that's the big problem, whether it's capitalism or socialism. But there is something to be said about who's going to have control of your life, and who's going to have control of your finances, and who's going to have control of your home, and who's going to have control over a lot of things. And things obviously are things worth fighting for. Most of us would say yes, but the next question would be why. And that's where we get into some of these arguments. So it's kind of neat. He's quoted a lot of different people, Dostoevsky and other people, and so some neat writers. And so let's get into his arguments against the early origin of the gospel. So he's using the Atheistic Handbook from Moscow, and he's basically doing rebuttals on them through the chapters. This one's called Their Arguments Against the Early Origin of the Gospels. But let us not be unfair. We have brought so many arguments of our own as to forget the weighty arguments of the academics against the early origins of the Gospels. There are three that he saw in the book, The Atheistic Handbook. The Gospels report the expelling of merchants from the temple. Quote, but there has been no commerce in that temple, unquote. How the doctors in atheism know this, they do not say. But we will quote from the Talmud, which is surely an acceptable reference on Jewish affairs and a higher authority in this matter than my opponents. In the treatise Shabbat, it says that 40 years before the destruction of the temple, which means within the lifetime of Jesus, there were shops in it. So that's his first rebuttal to their quote, how the doctors that there was no commerce in the temple. Basically, the Bible teaches that Jesus made a cord of whips and sat in the temple while he made this. And when he was doing this, merchants were there, and they were selling and bartering, and he found it quite offensive. Did Jesus, and so he expelled them from the temple area. And so the Atheistic Handbook and the writers thereof say, hey, there was no commerce in the temple back then. So we know that the Bible is wrong. And he quotes from the Talmud, the Jewish writings, and not the Bible. The Talmud is not the Bible, for those that don't know. It's just extra writings, basically commentary writings on the Bible and on the Old Testament and the times, if I remember, in between the Testaments, the Old and the New. So that's his first thing. So he says that the Talmud says that there was. So he says, who do you trust, the Talmud or the guys who wrote the Atheistic Handbook? 2. Quote, the Bible writes about a herd of 2,000 pigs in the district of the Gadarenes, in Palestine. But the breeding of pigs has been forbidden to the Jews from the times of the Old Testament. Therefore, in Palestine, there cannot exist herds of pigs. So that's another argument, right, against the early origins of the Bible. So the Bible must be wrong because of blah, 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 blah. And you hear that all the time, these different excuses, right, or different things that they bring up. And one of them is that, hey, these 2,000 pigs that were in the district of the Gadarenes in Palestine, there was no pigs in those days. I mean, in that area, those were Jewish people. How can they have pigs? Pigs were not kosher. So that was the argument. And he says, what opinion do you, dear reader, have about the conclusiveness of this argument? Be respectful. Academics are speaking. There can be no criminality in our country because the law forbids it. There cannot be any quarrel between Chinese, Russian, and Yugoslavian communists because proletarian internationalism forbids it. Do these propositions sound plausible? Besides, Moscow's academy must have a geographical section which should know that Gadara was in Perea, east of the Jordan, a region which properly did not belong to Palestine and was not populated by Jews only. So that's his rebuttal to that. Number 3. The authors of the Gospels could not be Jews because they do not mention animals natives to Palestine at the time, such as wildcats, jackals, and panthers. Another very convincing argument! Exclamation. By the same token, I might be led to believe that the Atheist Handbook was not written in the Soviet Union because lice, bugs, and rats are not mentioned in it. Haha. But I know how much Christians suffered because of these in prison in the earliest years of terror. I have done justice to my opponents. I have considered their arguments about the Gospels too, not just mine. It is for the reader to judge their comparative value. Okay, so that's some of the arguments that they had against the early origins of the Gospels, right? And I don't know about you if you've actually studied that situation. Sometimes you can go on YouTube and you just type in and you find different things, and the problem always with YouTube is that you can get someone who knows has a little bit of knowledge, and they're gonna give you things that makes you go, oh yeah, that's totally right. But if you're not listening to other people who have other answers to it, rebuttals to that, then you just kind of go your way. That's how it is in college, by the way, a ton of times, is you're in college and you just are getting spoon-fed certain things over and over and over and over. And of course, it makes you think that anybody who has any smarts must believe it because, hey, everybody who has smarts believes it. That's kind of how you think about it. And unfortunately, that leads to super indoctrination. And it's much better to have a professor that says, hey, don't believe anything I'm going to tell you. I'm going to give you my side of things and how I see it, but you need to look into it for yourself, and you're going to have to do more study and give you books that show other points of view as well. So that would be a much more integrity-filled class, even though there wasn't many classes like that. And I would always get into these weird talks with my professors at times, and they, of course, felt challenged by that, but they should feel challenged. If they don't want to feel challenged, maybe they should get a job in the elementary school instead of college. Maybe. So anyway, the message of the New Testament. The criticism brought against the New Testament as being a phantasmagoric late forgery are unfounded. What a great word. Phantasmagoric. Wow. Are unfounded. But if so, why were they brought? Suppose that the New Testament had a bad book. Why then are 700 pages, or suppose that the New Testament was a bad book. Then why are 700 pages written to refute it? Question. Every year in the Soviet Union, there used to appear good and bad, sometimes very bad novels. Nobody leads a worldwide crusade lasting decades against a bad novel. Readers themselves discard it. The line of the Communist Party in the USSR kept changing. Books considered great were suddenly banned. Years ago, who would have dared to have a library without the great genius Stalin's works or books? But one day an order came. The books simply disappeared. Wouldn't that be scary if we lived in a country that banned things, banned religious freedom, banned books, right? Nobody refutes them. They are buried in silence, as if they had not been written. Then Khrushchev began to publish his more modest collections of articles and speeches, well edited, so as not to remind the reader that he had been one of Stalin's flatterers. These books also disappeared. No refutations. Nobody refutes the tens of volumes of Trotsky. Why is it that fights are led to criticize, to tear to pieces the New Testament, while at the same time the Soviet population was forbidden to have a copy of it, from which they might have been able to form their own opinion? Right? Sometimes when government thinks that you can't have your own opinion, that becomes a problem. Beliefs must rest upon evidence open to examination. What science implies is not so much the importance of any particular truth as the right to seek truth and extend its youthfulness unhampered by restrictions. Particular beliefs can survive only as long as they justify themselves against opposition. Then why have people in communist countries been prevented from having the New Testament? It is because the Gospels and the New Testament as a whole contain a message of paramount importance for every man and woman. Can anyone imagine a good dinner without a cook? But nature is a banquet. There are in nature wheat and potatoes and milk and meat and fruits of many kinds. There are sunshine and rain, lovely flowers, and the joyful chirping of birds. There are things useful and things beautiful, to satisfy your body and gladden your soul. Who is the cook at the banquet of nature? Is it a wise creator, God? It is said that a scientist coming home from his laboratory was called to supper by his wife. A salad was set before him. Being an atheist, he said, quote, "If leaves of lettuce, grains of salt, drops of vinegar and oil, and slices of eggs have been floating about in the air from all eternity, it might at last happen by chance that there would come a salad." Yes, answered his wife, but not so nice and well dressed as mine. Unquote. Atoms which have come together at random would not make such a beautiful universe. The atom is mysterious. Life is mysterious. Scientists are far from having discovered their secrets. How much more then is God, the creator of matter and life, mysterious? The Gospel, according to John, says, quote, no one has seen God at any time. When Moses once asked to see God's glory, he received the categorical answer, you cannot see my face, for no man shall see me and live. No philosopher can comprehend him, but even the simplest man can apprehend him, just as no scientist comprehends yet the secrets of the atom, but every man can handle matter constituted of atoms. The New Testament tells us about this God, as does nature too. I once spoke with a prison officer, a member of the Communist Party. He told me in a moment of confidence, I looked one autumn day through the window at a bare tree. I knew the next spring it would again be full of leaves and buds, with birds chirping in its branches. And I adored the I do not know who, or I do not know what, which gives me trees and wheat and flowers. I throw back coals into the fire, and the fire changes it into beautiful white flames. I adore the power or the person. I do not know who or what he is, which rewards are of evil or good, and sometimes changes ugly lives of former bandits into beautiful lives of martyrs of holy cause. I have known such men among you Christians. This communist officer did not comprehend God, but he apprehended him. It is easy for atheists to ridicule primitive concepts of God as old man with a white beard sitting on a throne as he's depicted on the icons. When Christians are children, they are taught in a childlike way about God. Many of them, when they become older, fail to fulfill the biblical injunction to put away childish things. They remain with these childlike conceptions which are easily mocked by the atheist. But God is other. God is other than some immature conception of him. These icon images are surely not more ridiculous than the images of the atom drawn by the great physicist Niels Bohr. The atom is otherwise than we can draw it, and God is otherwise than what we think of him. But science could not do without its approximations. We Christians also use human words and human paintings to express our feelings about God. But Thomas Aquinas, one of our great teachers, wrote, quote, God is not what you imagine or what you think you understand. If you understand, you have failed, unquote. Our mind is surely too small to encompass the infinite being, but as I said, we can apprehend him. A Christian once asked an atheist with whom he took a walk through the meadows, quote, who made all these beautiful flowers? Forget it, was the answer. Do not come again with your stupid talk about God. The flowers exist by themselves. The Christian did not persist. After a few days, he was visited by the same atheistic friend in his home. He had in his sitting room a beautiful picture representing flowers. The atheist asked him, who painted this? The Christian said, do not begin with religious rubbish. Nobody painted these flowers. They came into the painting by themselves. Nature made the carved frame. Then, by itself, the picture jumped upon the wall, onto a nail which just happened to be there, driven by nobody. And that is all. Unquote. The atheist took the joke badly, but then the Christian asked, quote, is it logical to believe that these flowers in the picture, which have no fragrance and no life, must have been created by somebody, while believing that millions of living flowers with their heady perfume in the valleys and on the hills have no creator? Unquote. God is a mystery. Jesus teaches us to say, quote, our Father in heaven, not our Father who walks on the streets and can be met by everybody on any corner. He is in the world incognito. Pin a butterfly to a board and you have killed it. It is no more a butterfly but its corpse. So we cannot pin down God in any definition. We use names for him knowing that they are inadequate. The utmost that we can say about him is that he is the one beyond whom nothing greater can be conceived. But God has revealed himself in the person of Jesus Christ, the Son of God, who once came to this earth. About him the New Testament speaks. Millions have had their lives changed by him. False is the assertion of the atheist handbook that Christ's teachings destroy the joy of life. To renounce joy is an unchristian rejection of joy. To renounce joy is unchristian. Rejection of joy is a rejection of what we Christians consider the creation of God. Why should we refuse what a good Father has given us? The Old Testament provides what a man might vow to renounce for a short season all earthly pleasures. When this season was over, he had to bring a sacrifice to God as atonement for the sin of having disdained God's marvelous gift, pleasure. Christianity deprives nobody of joy. On the contrary, Christianity adds to pure earthly joys heavenly ones. What greater pleasure is there than to love? Do not accept all these unproved falsehood imputed to us, especially when Christian authors are not allowed to reply. The simple fact that atheists keep us gagging while they write shows that they are unfair and therefore not trustworthy. So to silence a minority can definitely be something that shows that there's error, there's a problem. Put your faith in God. This God suffers with us. He shares all of our sorrows. He sacrifices himself for us. He desires us. Marx and historical materialism have deprived reality of its very soul, God, and have thus devastated it. The knowledge of God is the key for knowing the world profoundly. We do not have reality plus God, but reality clothed in the beauty of God. Similarly, in a painting, we don't have scenery plus a sunset. Rather, all the hills and valleys and trees are bathed in its colors. In some caves of Thailand were discovered prehistoric drawings showing men and fish in what one might call X-ray style. The artist of not less than 3,000 years ago shows the details which he could not see, but about the existence of which he knew. Drawing a man or an animal, he included a skeleton of such organs as the stomach, lungs, etc. Such drawings were found earlier among the Aborigines of Australia. We consider this type of art primitive. It might not be as beautiful as our art, but it is nearer to reality. In a gallery of portraits, we see portrayed it is not primarily the subjects themselves, but rather the clothes made by their tailors. Of a subject, we see only the face and hands. If nudes are exposed, we see the skin. We are content with very little. The primitive artist wished more of reality because, in a sense, he was closer to reality than we sophisticated modern people. The New Testament speaks about the universe and history in the same X-ray manner. The materialists see only the outside of things. The believers see all the outside things plus what animates the universe and history, the inside, God working in his creation and manifesting himself as love in action. God sent his own Son, Jesus Christ, on our behalf. As a baker takes upon himself your care for bread, and the farmer your care for vegetables, and the shoemaker gives you his product, as a professor takes away your ignorance and gives you knowledge accumulated over the centuries, so Jesus, Son of God, the only one who never committed any sin, has taken it upon himself to care for you. He gives you his righteousness. You become like a newborn babe, like a man who has never sinned, like a life begins anew in fellowship with God. As for your sinfulness, he has taken it upon himself. You feel somehow that your sins have been very grave. They have produced suffering in others. Perhaps tears of blood have been shed, and you are guilty. Well, Jesus bore not only your sins, but also the punishment for your sins. He bore it, dying on the cross on a mount called Golgotha, near Jerusalem. Through his wounds you are healed. The New Testament says, God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. Note the word whosoever, even atheist, anyone. Anyone who has committed the worst of crimes. The New Testament teaches us that Jesus is standing at the door of our heart and constantly knocking. If anyone hears him and opens the doors, he comes in and talks with him heart to heart. Life does not consist only in working for the state or in eating, drinking, and enjoying sex. Christ is a spiritual being. He desires to enable you to overcome sin and death and hell, and only waits for your decision. And he promises not only a future heaven, but a heavenly life right now in your soul. The New Testament tells us that Christ, the Son of God, loved men so much that he prayed for his murderers even while enduring the pains of the cross. You may have been a thief. Christ died among thieves, and while hanging on the cross, saved one of them who repented for paradise. He did not shun scoundrels or harlots. It was his greatest joy to forgive great crimes. The New Testament is deprecated by atheists. Deprecated by atheists, because it proclaims love as the guiding principle of life and makes one's heart a corner of heaven. The mind begins to think truthfully because errors in life are often nothing less than a lack of love. After you have looked earnestly into the mirror of truth, which is Christ, great compassion towards all mankind will fill your soul and will be wonderful, and you be wonderfully free. The Soviet population was not permitted to know the message of the New Testament. Again, the Soviet population was not permitted to know the message of the New Testament because it would reconcile them to God. Therefore, the fierce but unfounded attacks upon it. But it is easy for us Christians who have this deep insight into the great realities of sin and atonement to understand why our atheist friends shudder before the cross and even write a book 700-page long against it. With unwelcome intuition, the atheists feel that the Bible contains the final truth. Stalin is dead, but never will any communist sing Stalin, lover of my soul, nor will he apt to sing Khrushchev, my most beloved, nor will his descendants a century from now sing Brezhnev, or to sing to Brezhnev, I need thee every hour. Yet these are sung about Jesus all over the world almost 2,000 years after his resurrection or crucifixion. The communist will never be able to silence these songs in Holy Mother Russia. About them no songs will be sung. Already jokes told about them today show that what fame they will have in the future. There is much sadness in the world. It needs laughter. I like it so much when people are joyful that I don't mind if they laugh at my expense. I hope that my opponents have the same feelings and that they will not take it amiss if I tell them two jokes which circulated in Russia. The first, a high school pupil was asked in history class, who was Stalin? He answered, a man who, loving the cult of his own personality, became a murderer. He killed even his nearest comrades. This is the teaching about him of the 20th Congress of our party. Bravo, says the professor. Now answer, please, who was Khrushchev? Promptly the boy replied, Khrushchev was an idiot, ridiculously removed from leadership by the vote of the Central Committee. Also very well. Now for the last question. Who is Brezhnev? He is another idiot, came the answer. The professor stopped him. This will probably be true in a year or two when a corresponding resolution is taken. For the time being, he is a genial leader, and I have to give you a bad mark. A second joke is this one. In a school, a teacher told the children, the party is our father and the Red Army is our mother. Then he asked one of the children, what would you like to become? The child answered, an orphan. Men have loved Jesus. Mankind has loved Jesus. Others have hated him. Most have been indifferent to his message, but nobody has ever dared to make ridiculous jokes about him. Okay, so that was the two So next week, I don't think I'll be able to do it, but we'll see. And I hope to continue. So thanks for joining me in this reading time.